This man was a slave. For 20 years, he belonged to the artist painting him, grinding his paints, preparing his canvases, watching genius happen while being forbidden to touch the same brush himself. And the man who owned him? Diego Velázquez, one of the greatest painters who ever lived. The painting you're looking at is called Portrait of Juan de Pareja, completed in Rome in 1650, and it's one of the most uncomfortable works of art ever created. This isn't because it's disturbing to look at, it's actually breathtakingly beautiful. But it's because of what it forces us to confront about power, freedom, and the choices we make when we truly see another person's humanity. 9 months after completing this portrait, Velázquez signed papers to free Juan de Pareja, and that single fact raises questions that haunt us to this day. Did the portrait change his heart, or did it just make slavery inconvenient? We'll never know for certain, but by the end of this video, you'll understand why that uncertainty is exactly what makes this painting so powerful and so uncomfortably beautiful. Diego Velázquez was born in Seville in 1599 and became one of the most celebrated painters in history. By his 30s, he was the court painter to King Philip IV of Spain, creating masterpieces that still hang in the greatest museums around the world. Juan de Pareja was born around 1608 in southern Spain, probably in Antequera. His mother was Zulema, a mixed-race enslaved woman of part African descent. His father was a white Spaniard, also named Juan, and may have been the very man who enslaved Pareja's mother. We don't know for certain. What we do know is that Pareja was described in historical documents as a morisco. That's a term that literally meant a Muslim convert to Christianity, but it was also used to describe people of mixed parentage in general and of, quote, unusual color. In 17th century Spain, this designation carried weight. It meant that you existed in the margins. You weren't fully Spanish, but you also weren't fully African. You were caught between worlds in a society obsessed with blood purity. Now, before we go further, we need to understand something crucial. Slavery was absolutely ordinary in 17th century Spain. In Seville, it's likely that 1 in 14 people were slaves. Half of all artisan workshops used enslaved labor. People grinding pigments, stretching canvases, working leather. The city also had a significant population of freed Black Africans and mixed-race people, though freedom didn't always mean equality. They remained on the social margins. So Velázquez owning Pareja wasn't unusual or cruel by his time's standards. It was Tuesday. Doctors, lawyers, priests, even religious orders owned slaves. But that's what makes this story so uncomfortable. This wasn't some extraordinary evil. It was an ordinary one, and Juan de Pareja was caught in it. By the 1630s, historical documents place him in Velázquez's household in Madrid. For over 20 years, Pareja worked in Velázquez's studio. His job was to grind those pigments, crushing minerals and materials into a powder to be used for paint. He stretched the canvases, he prepared the varnishes, he cleaned all of the brushes. He did everything that made this great art possible. But Spanish law at the time forbade slaves from practicing skilled professions, including painting. So while Pareja watched one of history's greatest artists at work, day after day, year after year, he was legally prohibited from becoming the same type of artist himself. We know Pareja was literate. We know he was trusted enough to sign legal documents as a witness for Velázquez. He wasn't just property, he was absolutely essential, and that makes the whole thing even more uncomfortable. In 1649, King Philip IV sent Velázquez to Italy to acquire art for the royal collection. Pareja traveled with him, sailing to Genoa, through Milan and Venice, seeing masterpieces by Titian, Tintoretto, and Veronese, an education most artists could only dream of. In Rome, Velázquez faced his biggest commission, painting Pope Innocent X. But the Pope was powerful, impatient, and unlikely to grant long sessions. Velázquez needed practice to work out his approach, to test his palette and refine his technique for painting someone quickly from life. And that's when he turned to his slave, Juan de Pareja. Velázquez set up a temporary studio in Rome and painted this portrait, this epic painting that now hangs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City and is part of their fantastic collection of old masters. Pareja stood there, the man who had prepared countless canvases for his master, and he became the subject himself. Look at the technical mastery, the white collar against dark clothing, the warm copper-toned skin, the eyes that seem to follow you across the room. Velázquez used loose, almost impressionistic brushwork that gives the painting incredible vitality. This is why Velázquez is considered one of the greatest painters who ever lived. An early biographer described his technique. Up close, it's just masses of paint with no precise detail. But step back, and suddenly every element falls into perfect clarity. You can see exactly how every piece of clothing fits, where it's attached, how the fabric moves. The painting demonstrates what's called alla prima technique, wet on wet, painted quickly and directly without multiple layers. Most artists of his time built up portraits slowly, layer after layer. Velázquez captures everything in one session. The immediacy, the life. That's why people said it looked like truth itself, because it was painted with the speed and directness of seeing someone in real life. But here's what's most striking about this portrait: the dignity, the direct gaze, the quiet confidence. In 17th century European art, black figures and people of mixed race were typically depicted as servants in the background, often looking down or away from the viewer, not making eye contact, not claiming space. For someone described as morisco, caught between categories and marked as other, for him to be painted with this level of respect was virtually unprecedented. This portrait does the opposite. Pareja looks directly at us. His presence is commanding. There's intelligence in his eyes, and there's something else, a kind of patience, or perhaps endurance. Art historians see in this portrait what one called an extraordinary human relationship between artist and sitter. 20 years together, daily proximity, extended trips alone across Italy. And this level of intimacy in how he's painted is extraordinary as well. If this were a portrait of a woman enslaved to Velázquez, painted with this much tenderness, people wouldn't hesitate to ask questions about the nature of their relationship. The fact that we rarely ask those questions about two men says more about our assumptions than about the actual history, probably. We have no evidence either way, no letters between them, no rumors substantiated, nothing. But we also know that in 17th century Spain, under the Inquisition, such things would never be documented, even if they did exist. What we do know is this: Velázquez painted Juan de Pareja with an intimacy, a tenderness that stands out even in his extraordinary body of work. Whatever the full nature of their relationship, the portrait itself is proof of something: affection, recognition, connection. And 9 months later, he freed him. When the portrait was finished, Velázquez exhibited it at the Pantheon in Rome on March 19, 1650, during the Feast of St. Joseph's celebrations. The reaction was extraordinary. According to a Flemish painter who was there, the portrait received universal acclaim. In a room full of paintings by different artists, people said everything else looked like painting, but this alone looked like truth. Really quick, if you'd love to have this painting in your home, you can find it through the link in the description. In my catalog, you'll discover many more works by Velázquez and even Juan de Pareja himself, as well as other masterpieces from the Spanish Golden Age and from the great museums of the world. So you can start your own art collection and turn your home into your personal museum. Shipping is always free worldwide, and by purchasing, you'll be helping to support this channel and me creating more well-researched videos just like this. All right, let's continue. Now here's where the story gets even more uncomfortable. According to early accounts, Velázquez had Juan de Pareja carry the portrait around Rome to show potential clients. So think about that for a minute. Pareja had to walk through the streets of Rome holding a painting of his own face, marketing his own image, his own humanity, as proof of someone else's genius. The portrait brought celebrity to Velázquez. It opened doors. It led to major commissions, including the papal portrait. But what did it bring to Pareja? He couldn't sign his name to it. He couldn't claim any credit. He was simultaneously the star of the show and completely invisible. And then, 9 months later, something changed. On November 23, 1650, Velázquez signed a document granting Pareja his freedom. It would take effect in 4 years, a common practice called conditional manumission. This document wasn't discovered until 1983, and here's what makes it frustrating. It's pure legal boilerplate. No explanation, no personal statement, nothing. We have no idea why Velázquez freed him. Scholars have speculated, of course. Maybe the portrait's success made slavery awkward. Maybe painting such profound humanity changed something in Velázquez. Maybe he identified with Pareja's precarious position, having faced his own scrutiny from the Inquisition. But the honest answer is we don't know, and we never probably will. After gaining his freedom in 1654, Juan de Pareja became a working artist in Madrid. He painted religious scenes, portraits, large-scale works for churches and wealthy patrons. He built an independent career, not as Velázquez's assistant, but as his own man. His style was distinct from Velázquez. While Velázquez used loose brushwork and shadowy, intimate compositions, Pareja aligned himself with the Madrid school, dense, crowded scenes with rich, Venetian-inspired colors. He developed his own artistic voice. In 1661, Pareja created his most famous work, The Calling of St. Matthew. It's a massive painting, 11 feet wide, showing the moment Christ calls the tax collector Matthew to follow him. And in the far left of the painting, Pareja included a full-length self-portrait. He's standing confidently, dressed as a Spanish gentleman, looking, again, directly at the viewer. After decades of invisibility and years of being property, Juan de Pareja painted himself right into the story. He claimed authorship. He demanded to be seen, and he was seen. The painting was commissioned for a church, displayed publicly, and respected. Pareja continued painting until his death in 1670. Today, 14 of his works are firmly attributed to him, with several more possible attributions. He achieved what seemed impossible: freedom, artistry, recognition. For centuries, his contributions were overlooked or dismissed. Art historians suggested that he tried to copy Velázquez and failed, and they missed the point entirely. It wasn't until the 20th century, thanks largely to Arturo Schomburg, a black Puerto Rican historian of the Harlem Renaissance, and other similar art historians, that Pareja's story was recovered and his artistic achievements finally recognized. So, why is this the most uncomfortable portrait in the Met, and possibly in all of art history? Well, it's uncomfortable because it shows us something beautiful created through exploitation. It's uncomfortable because we can't separate the genius from the cruelty of the system. It's uncomfortable because we want a clear moral narrative. Either Velázquez was a villain or a hero, and we don't get that. He had a slave for over 20 years, and then he freed him. Both things are true. Neither one cancels out the other. But here's why that discomfort is actually valuable. It forces us to ask harder questions. How much suffering are we willing to ignore for our own convenience? Right now, somebody is assembling your phone under conditions you'd never accept. Somebody is stitching your clothes. Somebody is harvesting your coffee. We know this, and we make the choice every day to look away. Velázquez looked into Juan de Pareja's eyes and painted what he saw: undeniable humanity. And 9 months later, whether from conscience or convenience, he signed the Freedom Papers. The question this portrait asks us is simple. What would it take for you to do the same? What would you have to see, to really see, to give up your comfort? This painting hangs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, where it's been since 1971. The museum paid $5.5 million for it, a record at the time, and people still stop in front of it, captivated by those beautiful eyes. This painting can cut deep and do so with beauty. That's the discomfort, but also the absolute magic of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Does knowing the story behind this portrait change how you see it? And if you were in Velázquez's position, do you think you would have made the same choice? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we continue to explore the greatest old masters in the Met.